Rain fell in relentless sheets over the city, washing the color out of everything. The streetlights flickered weakly, throwing fractured halos across the puddles. Amid the cold and chaos of rushing cars and shivering pedestrians, a small figure huddled beneath the broken awning of an abandoned bookstore. His clothes were soaked through, his bare feet pressed against the freezing concrete, and his arms wrapped protectively around a worn-out blanket. Inside the folds of that blanket was a small, muddy shoe, pink, torn at the heel, the only piece of his sister he had left. His name was Liam Carter, and at just 10 years old, he had already seen more loss than most men twice his age. His sister, Mia, had disappeared 3 days ago when city workers cleared out the underpass where they used to sleep. The police called it an evacuation. To Liam, it was the night everything was stolen from him. He sat still, shivering, his lips trembling as thunder cracked overhead. Every time the sky flashed white, he looked up, as if maybe, somehow, she would appear, small, smiling, clutching his hand like she used to when the noise scared her. "You're okay, Mia," he whispered to the air. "I'm still looking. I promised I'd find you." His voice cracked, swallowed by the wind. A group of strangers walked past, well-dressed, umbrellas open, laughter loud. None of them saw him. Or maybe they did, and just didn't care. To the world, Liam was invisible, another forgotten face lost in the city's endless rain. Across the street, a sleek black car slowed to a stop in front of the Grand Haven Hotel, one of the most luxurious in the city. The driver, a man in a dark suit, stepped out to open the door. From inside emerged Damien Cross, a name that carried power and fear in equal measure. He was the youngest billionaire in the country, a man who had turned a collapsing logistics company into a global empire before he was 35. The tabloids loved him, the ruthless genius who didn't believe in mercy. Yet as he stepped onto the wet pavement and lifted his umbrella, something in his eyes looked distant, hollow. Success had built walls around him, but it hadn't filled the silence of his empty penthouse or erased the ghost of the sister he'd lost as a teenager in the foster system. As Damien turned toward the hotel entrance, a flash of movement across the street caught his eye, the small, trembling figure clutching something close to his chest. For reasons he couldn't explain, Damien hesitated. His driver cleared his throat. "Sir, it's cold. Let's go inside." But Damien's gaze stayed fixed on the boy. The rain, the way he curled into himself, it tugged at something buried deep, something he thought he'd buried long ago. He crossed the street without a word, ignoring the driver's protests. When the shadow of the tall man fell over Liam, the boy flinched and looked up with frightened eyes. His cheeks were streaked with rain and tears, his lips blue from the cold. Damien crouched down, his voice low and steady. "Hey there, son. Where are your parents?" Liam shook his head slowly. "Gone." His voice was barely a whisper. He pressed the small shoe tighter to his chest, as though it were a living thing. Damien frowned. "Are you alone?" Liam hesitated, then whispered, "No. My sister's out there. I just want my sister back." The words broke something inside him, a raw, desperate sound that made Damien's throat tighten. For a long moment, neither spoke, just the sound of rain, the distant hum of traffic, and the fragile heartbeat of hope clinging to the boy's trembling voice. Damien looked at him, really looked, and saw not a beggar, but a child who had been left behind by everyone. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Liam," the boy replied, his chin trembling. "All right, Liam," Damien said, removing his expensive coat and draping it over the boy's shoulders. The fabric swallowed him whole, but for the first time in days, Liam felt warm. "Come with me. You shouldn't be out here." Liam blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. "I can't leave," he said quickly. "Mia might come back. She'll look for me." Damien paused. There was conviction in the boy's voice, the kind born from pure love. "If she does," he said gently, "I promise she'll know where to find you. I'll help you look for her." Liam stared up at him, the stranger with kind eyes and a voice that didn't sound like pity. Slowly, he nodded. Damien took his small, cold hand and led him toward the car. As the doors shut and the city blurred past the windows, Liam whispered one last time, more to himself than to anyone, "Please don't forget her." Damien's jaw tightened. "I won't," he said softly, more to the memory of his own sister than the boy beside him. He didn't yet know it, but that rainy night, the night he stopped for a shivering child, would change both of their lives forever. The storm had finally passed by the time Damien's car pulled into the private driveway of his penthouse. The city's lights shimmered on the wet pavement, reflecting in Liam's wide eyes as he pressed his face to the window. He had never been anywhere like this before: marble steps, glass walls, and guards who moved like shadows in the rain. When Damien opened the car door, Liam hesitated, clutching the pink shoe tightly to his chest. "It's okay," Damien said quietly, holding out a hand. "You're safe here." For a moment, Liam just stared at the outstretched hand, suspicious and unsure. But something in Damien's voice, calm, firm, and patient, made him finally take it. His small fingers slipped into Damien's, and together they walked through the golden-lit lobby, past people who stopped to stare at the soaked, barefoot boy beside a billionaire in a tailored suit. Inside the penthouse, warmth replaced the chill that had gripped Liam for days. The room was vast. Walls of glass revealing the city skyline, floors polished to a mirror shine, and shelves lined with books and photographs. But to Liam, it felt too big, too clean, too far from the only world he had ever known. A maid rushed forward with towels and blankets, but Damien shook his head. "I'll handle it." He led Liam to a couch near the fireplace, handing him a towel and pouring a cup of hot chocolate. The boy took it gingerly, sipping as if it were something sacred. "You live here alone?" Liam asked after a moment, his voice small. "Yes," Damien said, sitting across from him. "It's quieter that way." He hesitated before adding, "Where were you staying before I found you?" Liam's eyes lowered. "Me and Mia stayed under the bridge by the old train tracks. It was cold, but we had each other. One night, some men came, said they were from child services. They took Mia and said they'd come back for me, but they never did." His lips trembled as he spoke. "I tried to follow the van, but I lost it. The police said they'd look, but they never called back." Damien's brows furrowed. He had heard rumors of fake shelters, operations that promised food and safety but trafficked children instead. "Do you remember what the men looked like?" Liam nodded. "One had a blue jacket with a bird on it. The van was white, no windows. They said it was called Hope Haven." The name hit Damien like a jolt. He had seen it before, a charity foundation that had once approached his company for sponsorship. On the surface, it was spotless: donations, community drives, smiling faces in press photos. But something about their records had felt too clean, too rehearsed. He had declined to fund them. Now he knew why. "Liam," he said gently, "I need you to trust me. I know people who can help find your sister." Liam looked up, hope flickering through his exhaustion. "You really can find her?" "I'll do everything I can," Damien promised. He meant it. For the first time in years, something felt real, not a deal, not a headline, but a life that mattered. After Liam finally fell asleep on the couch, clutching the blanket tightly, Damien moved to his office. He stared out over the glowing city below, anger and purpose building in his chest. He opened his laptop and dialed a private line. The voice on the other end was rough and tired. "You're calling late, Cross. That's not like you." "Ethan," Damien said, his tone clipped. "I need a favor. Find everything you can about an organization called Hope Haven. Locations, owners, donors, everything. And find a little girl named Mia Carter, about 6 or 7 years old. She was taken 3 days ago." There was silence, then the sound of typing. "That's not a charity." We've had whispers about them before, shady operations, missing paperwork. But if they're running kids, that's dangerous territory. I don't care how dangerous, Damien said coldly. I want them found. When he hung up, Damien leaned back in his chair and stared at the framed photograph on his desk, a faded picture of him and his sister, Sophie, taken years before she died in foster care. The resemblance between Liam's desperation and his own haunted memories was impossible to ignore. He could still remember her voice, crying for him in the dark. He had been too late to save her. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Hours passed, the city slowly drifting into dawn. Ethan's message finally came through, encrypted, urgent. Hope Haven was not a government facility. It was a front for an underground network that relocated children for profit. Damien's fists tightened. He looked toward the couch, where Liam was still curled up, asleep, his small hand gripping the pink shoe. Hang in there, kid, Damien whispered. We'll find her. He made another call, this time to his head of security, instructing them to prepare a private team, vehicles, and safe houses. The billionaire who once cared only for profits was now preparing for war. He didn't yet know that by the time this was over, his name would be in every newspaper in the world, not as the ruthless tycoon, but as the man who refused to let another child disappear. The next 3 days passed in a blur of tension, rain, and sleepless nights. Damien barely left his office, working around the clock with Ethan and his security team. Every lead, every pixel of CCTV footage, every whisper from the city's underworld was pulled into the search for Mia Carter. The world saw Damien Cross as a billionaire who thrived on control, a man who could bend entire markets to his will. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was personal. The same cold fury that had once driven him to conquer empires now burned with a new purpose, finding one lost little girl. Ethan's reports trickled in piece by piece. The organization known as Hope Haven had multiple fronts across the city, fake foster homes, abandoned clinics, and warehouses registered under false names. Their public image was pristine, their website filled with smiling children and polished mission statements. But beneath the surface, they were moving kids like currency, selling them under the guise of adoption services to foreign buyers and corrupt networks. Damien's stomach turned as he read the files. These people built an empire on stolen lives, he muttered, his voice tight with disgust. That evening, Ethan called. We found something. There's a facility on the east side, near the docks. It matches the van description. We tracked a signal from one of their drivers, the same man who picked up Mia. Damien didn't wait for permission or backup. He was already on his feet. Get my car ready. I'm going myself. Ethan sighed on the other end. You're not a cop, Damien. Let us handle it. No, Damien snapped. You've seen what happens when people wait for the system to fix things. I won't lose another child because of red tape. When he returned to the living room, Liam was sitting on the couch, still wearing Damien's oversized hoodie. His small face was pale, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Did you find her? He asked, his voice trembling with both hope and fear. Maybe, Damien said carefully. We found a place where she might be. I need you to stay here with my assistant until I get back. But Liam shook his head violently. No. You can't go without me. What if she's scared? She'll only come if she hears my voice. His words hit Damien hard. He remembered being that age, remembering his sister's voice as the only thing that kept him from falling apart. After a long pause, he nodded. All right, he said quietly. You're coming with me. By the time they reached the docks, night had swallowed the city. The air reeked of salt, oil, and rust. The building ahead of them was a squat, windowless structure with a faded, Hope Haven storage sign half hanging from its frame. Damien killed the headlights and parked in the shadows. His team was already in position, 3 men waiting in silence, each armed and ready. Stay behind me no matter what, Damien whispered to Liam. The boy nodded, gripping the small shoe in his pocket like a charm. They moved fast. Damien kicked open the side door, and his men swept inside, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The sound of footsteps, the creak of old pipes, the distant hum of machines, the place felt like a graveyard for stolen lives. Room after room revealed nothing but broken furniture and boxes of fake documents. Then came the faintest sound, a whimper. Liam froze. "That's her," he whispered. "That's Mia." The sound came from behind a locked metal door. Damien's heart hammered as he rammed his shoulder against it once, twice, until it burst open. Inside was a small room with a single light bulb swinging overhead. Several children huddled together on the floor, frightened, pale, and too quiet for their age. And there, clutching a torn blanket, was Mia. "Mia!" Liam cried, rushing forward. She blinked in disbelief before breaking into tears, scrambling to her feet and throwing herself into her brother's arms. "You came," she sobbed, her small voice muffled against his shoulder. "You promised you'd come." "I told you I would," Liam whispered, holding her tight. Damien knelt beside them, his chest tight. The sight of them together, two souls who had survived the impossible, burned something deep inside him. But the moment was cut short by a shout from the hallway. "They're coming!" Within seconds, the men behind Hope Haven burst into the room, armed and furious. Damien's team reacted instantly, tackling them to the ground. It was chaos, shouts, thuds, the sound of glass shattering. One man lunged at Damien, but years of boxing training and pure adrenaline kicked in. Damien dodged and struck him hard across the jaw. The man crumpled. When the sirens finally wailed in the distance, Damien stood over the broken men, chest heaving. The police had arrived, far too late to be the heroes. Reporters would later say the billionaire fought like a man possessed, but in truth, he hadn't been fighting for fame or redemption. He was fighting for every child the world forgot, every promise he once broke to his own sister. As the officers led the criminals away, Damien turned to Liam and Mia. She was trembling but safe, her small fingers tangled in her brother's sleeve. "You're both safe now," he said softly. "No one will ever hurt you again." The flash of cameras began outside, police lights bouncing off the wet docks. But Damien didn't care about the spectacle. All that mattered was the two children clinging to each other in the rain, the proof that love, no matter how broken or desperate, could still bring light to the darkest corners of the world. Morning crept slowly over the city, washing the chaos of the night before into a hazy calm. For most, it was just another sunrise, but for Damien Cross, it marked the first dawn that didn't feel empty in years. The rain had stopped, replaced by a golden light spilling across the hospital window where he stood, watching the two sleeping children in the next room. Liam and Mia lay side by side, curled under warm blankets, their small hands clasped together even in sleep. For the first time since he'd met Liam, the boy's face was peaceful. No fear. No hunger. Just the simple, fragile stillness of a child finally safe. The soft buzz of Damien's phone broke the silence. His assistant's voice came through, shaky with disbelief. "Sir, you're everywhere. The media's calling it a miracle." Damien frowned and turned up the television mounted on the wall. Every news channel carried the same headline, flashing in bold across the screen: "Billionaire risks his life to rescue missing children from underground ring." Images of police cars, flashing lights, and Damien carrying Mia through the rain played over and over, replaying the night he'd rather forget. Reporters praised his bravery, politicians called him a hero, and social media exploded with gratitude. But Damien didn't care about any of that. The only thing that mattered was that two children, one boy's promise, had not been broken. When Liam stirred awake, he blinked groggily before sitting up in confusion. "Where are we?" he asked softly. "In a hospital," Damien replied with a faint smile. "You're both safe now." Mia woke soon after, and when she saw her brother, she burst into tears, clinging to him tightly. "I thought you wouldn't find me," she whispered. Liam wiped her cheeks with his thumb. "I told you I would," he said, glancing at Damien. "He helped me." Damien's throat tightened. He crouched beside the bed, meeting their eyes. "You two have been through something no child should ever face," he said gently. "But it's over now. I've spoken to the authorities. You'll be placed in a safe home until we figure out what's next." Mia looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. "You mean, we don't have to go back to the streets?" "No," Damien said softly. "Never again." A nurse entered, checking their vitals, but paused when she recognized Damien. "Mr. Cross," she said hesitantly, "there are reporters downstairs. They're asking for a statement. They want to know why you got involved." Damien looked back at the children before answering quietly, "Tell them I'll speak when they stop calling it a miracle and start calling it a responsibility." Later that afternoon, he stood outside the hospital, cameras flashing from every direction. Reporters shouted questions. Why risk your life for strangers? Was this a publicity stunt? What message do you want to send? Damien waited for silence before speaking. His voice was calm but steady, echoing across the crowd. "I didn't do this for headlines. I did this because no child should ever have to beg to be loved, or wonder if anyone will come for them. I failed my own sister once. I won't fail another." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the reporters stunned and silent. That night, after the children were discharged, Damien took them home, not to the cold marble penthouse, but to the countryside estate he rarely visited. The place had once been meant for family, but until now, it had never truly felt like one. Liam and Mia ran through the halls with laughter echoing off the high ceilings, chasing each other past the grand staircase and into the garden that stretched beneath the fading sunset. Damien watched from the porch, an unfamiliar warmth filling his chest. As the stars began to bloom overhead, Mia climbed onto the porch steps beside him, clutching a small stuffed bear a nurse had given her. "Mr. Damien," she said shyly, "are you our dad now?" The question caught him off guard. For a long moment, he couldn't find the words. Then he smiled, his eyes softening. "I don't know," he said quietly. "Do you want me to be?" Mia nodded eagerly, her face lighting up. "You saved us. That means your family." Liam, standing nearby, added in his small but certain voice, "We don't want to lose you either." Something inside Damien broke, the walls, the emptiness, the guilt he'd carried for years. He knelt down, pulling both children into his arms. "Then I guess I'm yours," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. Weeks later, a new headline appeared across every newspaper in the country: "Damien Cross adopts street siblings, promises them the family they deserve." The world called it charity. But for Damien, it wasn't an act of kindness, it was redemption. Months passed, and laughter replaced silence in his once empty home. Mia filled the halls with drawings, Liam followed Damien around the garden with endless questions, and for the first time in his life, Damien learned what love without condition truly felt like. The man who had spent his life building empires finally realized that the greatest thing he could ever build was a family. And on one quiet evening, as the three of them sat by the fire, Mia looked up at him and whispered, "Do you think my mom can see us?" Damien smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I think she's smiling," he said softly. "Because her little girl and her brother finally have a home." Outside, the wind stirred the trees, carrying the sound of laughter into the night, a promise kept, a heart healed, and a new beginning written in the light of love.